So I wasn't going to jump on the Justin Eichorn bandwagon, but it seems like it makes sense right about now to point out a couple of things having to do with the general hypocrisy that we see out there regarding sex and so-called sex crimes. And it's not that I don't disagree about Mr. Eichorn and what he did in violations of law. I just think that if you disagree with the law, you ought to move to change it. And of course, I certainly disagree with racking, packing, and stacking and setting people up, which is also what's happening. But more to the point. So Justin Eichorn, if you have not heard, and you almost have to be in a hole not to have heard, was or is, until he will resign, I'm sure, a Minnesota state senator who on Friday of last week tried to put in a snarky little bill in the Minnesota legislature that would codify disagreement with Trump and pointing out his derangement, his mental instability as some kind of mental instability itself, calling it Trump derangement syndrome. And as cynical and pathetic and ass-kissing of the orange wonder that is, it was only topped by Justin Eichorn's behavior after that. On Monday, he decided apparently that he would meet a young woman in Bloomington, Minnesota, some 4 hours south of his district, which is in the city of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, which just has a few thousand people on the Iron Range up there near Duluth and Virginia, about 2 hours from where I grew up, incidentally. And Mr. Eichorn, age 40, decided to meet what he thought was a 17-year-old prostitute who was trying to earn some extra money. And I say that because before I get attacked by people who were molested as a child or forced into prostitution, for which I'm very sympathetic, there are women who have been in the news who either in college or as older women or even young men do in fact prostitute themselves. They don't call it that. They enjoy sex, but they get paid for it. And who pays? Older men. And Mr. Eichorn decided that he was going to meet this young woman in Bloomington. Instead, he met a undercover cop who had been talking to him. And what's kind of interesting is it brings up not only the hypocrisy issue of the family values people, that's not my main concern here, but of all the trolls and others who want to yip and yap about how, oh, this is against the law, this is, there's so much for children and against those who violate law. You have to wonder how many of them had sex when they were teenagers with older people, or how many of those people actually had sex with older people, or how many of those people who are legislators like Eichorn and like this recent legislator, longtime dean of the North Dakota legislature, who apparently was going overseas and engaging with young boys for sexual tourism for years before he was finally caught. And these folks bring up, though, an interesting comment and an interesting question I've posed before with trolls who have tried to put me on the spot and say, what age do you think a young person should have sex? Because what they're trying to do is determine my preferences. And my preferences, such as they are, which are not young people that young, underage, are certainly a subject for debate, because don't forget, we have around the world, and in Virginia up till recently, 16 was the age of allowable sex. Of course, Eichorn states this to the undercover cop when the undercover cop says, are you okay with my age? And Eichorn says, yeah, because 17's fine, because 16 is the age of coitus. But that isn't really it. And he should know better as a legislator, particularly because according to a lot of the laws, that might be different if you're 18 and you're just separated by a couple of years. But in reality, what is out there is a codicil to the law, which says that if you are 5 to 7 or whatever years, whatever it says in the law, I've seen both 5 and 7, away from the person, older usually, then that is not permissible under law. So he is doubly screwed because he said he knew the age, and he said that he knew that it was not an age that would be of consent under law, or he should have known rather that that was not an age under law, but he did not. And so he's, I think, really in trouble, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. However, I do have one tiny bit of sympathy for him because the trolls and others treat this as if he had gang raped a toddler. And folks, 17 is close to 18, and we have arbitrarily decided 18 is going to be our age. And yet the law at times will say, well, 17, there's a different consideration. Even for 16-year-olds, certain places like Virginia have considered whether 16-year-olds should perhaps vote. So we have all these differences that are out there. Plus in Europe, 14, 15, and 16 are the age of sex. And maybe this reignites the debate on the legalization of prostitution, like we used to have the debate about marijuana, where 25 years ago you could be hammered for a very long prison term, and now for just a small amount, and now it's legal. Maybe this is what we do, since so many Republicans, among others, keep being caught in this. And of course, as I am living testament to it, you can not propose sex, not have sex, and not suggest sex, and still end up having your life ruined if a police officer claims that that's what you were doing. More on that in this afternoon or maybe tomorrow's episode, where I'm going to talk about where a troll on Fairfax Underground decided he had me over a barrel, and he quotes what he claims is the official word, and he's right in a way. A judge or a judge's clerk wrote it, but it's factually incorrect. It's not actually in the record. It is in the transcript of what actually happened. It is in the transcript of what the lying police officer, Detective Bauer, said. So back to the issue at hand here. You've got another case that really is beyond the pale that I'm sure would not pass muster, and that is of Robert Morris, who was Trump's one-time so-called spiritual advisor down in Texas, who also was recently arrested in Oklahoma, I think. And what Mr. Morris was doing is having repeated sex with a 12-year-old girl. He is up on 100 years, which means that they took each of his explicit chats with her or explicit references with her and hold that against him. He's in a whole world of trouble. And you have to wonder, if this is a first-time situation and it is not proposing sex, and it's an underage or undercover officer, and again, first time, should this be part of restorative justice? Should this be some kind of episode where you have an alternative to incarceration? And before the trolls attack me on that, listen to some of my previous episodes where I talked about Caitlin Grimley, who I'm sure if she's listening this is not happy that I keep mentioning her name, but for the fact that Ms. Grimley should be thanking her lucky stars over and over again as a teacher in Fauquier County here, that she actually had sex with an 8th grade boy multiple times, age 14 or 13, and we'll get away with it. No sex offender registry, no time in jail or prison, not much of a fine, if anything, no community service except for 1 year, which is already pretty much 9 months over, at least, of restorative justice, whatever that is, where she goes through counseling. She has to admit guilt, of course, but they're not even going to take her license away, it seems, because according to the law, her 4 class 4 felonies, which carry about 20 years each in them, up to 20 years each, and mandatory minimums of 5 years, so that would be 5 times 4, 20 years. That's how I come to that. In prison will be erased and replaced with misdemeanors instead, which is a great deal if you can get it. So here we have people who have committed crimes against young and small children who will get no incarceration, including, by the way, police officers who get many times probation and they're allowed to resign quietly from the force. People like Caitlin Grimley who will get nothing. People like this Morris guy and Eichorn who will be hammered. People like me and Ryan Pick and others who have no contact offenses who will be who have been hammered, although mine is far less than somebody like Pick, who did substantially not much more. And in my case, again, no sex talk and no pictures. So the one picture they talk about, I've talked about before, and there's substantial evidence that I never actually sent it. Though when the police officer told me, I could not dispute it because I could not see it. The only thing I said was, I didn't do it. I had no recollection of doing it. And now it seems, since they didn't secure the evidence of my phone, they didn't secure my phone, they had it going and not put in a Faraday box. Knowing what we know about police officers, it's entirely likely that they planted it. So that's something that we really need to talk about. The larger issue of what constitutes abuse, what constitutes consent, where we ought to view it, where we shouldn't view it, and what should be criminalized. It, is not a debate that I'm reigniting. It's a debate that we have had off and on throughout our history, not to mention our forebears marrying in their teens, and we call them great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents. It's a subject for legitimate debate, and I don't necessarily have an opinion either way. I think it really depends on the maturity level of the persons, and different people mature at a different level. And that's just kind of the way it is. That's what we're told from the social scientists and the psychologists. There are people much older, not mature, people much younger, mature. So hit me back. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, and have a good day.